Hi team, we've arrived at the climax of the history of Japan, World War II in Asia. Most people are used to thinking of World War II as something that began in 1939. And for the general learner of history, that's fine. Nazi Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, which triggered a truly global war. But Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan had become allies before that, and Hitler was expanding a war that Japan had already started in 1937. World War II in Asia begins with the Japanese invasion of China in 1937. We have already seen that Japan started building an empire in response to the pressure of American and European gunboat diplomacy. The Japanese did not want to be overrun by foreign cultures, especially Western cultures that have Christianity, because they were afraid of its effect on their Shinto culture. So the Japanese embarked on a career of reactionary imperialism. It wasn't natural for Japan to be imperial. Japan was xenophobic, which meant that it was afraid of the world and did not want contact with everyone else. But when contact became unavoidable, Japan was pressed to choose between being dominated by others or doing the dominating itself. It's pretty obvious that Japan took the second path. They began building their empire in Korea, conquering and ruling that country, and even trying to erase its culture outright, starting in 1910. Then they took over Manchuria, which they called Manchukuo, in 1931. Remember, everything Japan touched, it renamed. At this time in history, there was supposed to be a group of countries working together to prevent wars. It was called the League of Nations. The League of Nations, like the United Nations today, was a place where people did a lot of talking and complaining, but never actually stopped any wars. The Japanese saw, for instance, that Italy conquered Ethiopia in 1935, and all the League of Nations did was complain. The leader of Italy, Benito Mussolini, said, "The League is very well when sparrows shout, but no good at all when eagles fall out." This meant that powerful nations simply do whatever they want, and all the weak countries in the world can't do anything about it. Japan learned that lesson, and in 1937, they invaded China. Just like Germany, Japan was incredibly brutal. Probably the most infamous episode of the war is the Nanjing Massacre, when as many as 300,000 Chinese people were killed by the Japanese army. China has never forgiven Japan for this. As you may know from our Angervac series on China, the Chinese were already fighting a civil war against each other at the time, so that made it more difficult for them to resist Japan. But not surprisingly, the Chinese put their war against each other on pause in order to fight the Japanese. Still, they might very well have been defeated anyways, if it were not for the fatal mistake that Japan made. Japan feared that the United States would enter the war, so their military commanders decided to take a gamble. They decided to launch a sneak attack on the United States on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. It was a terrible attack, to be sure, but it did not succeed. It did not prevent America from entering the war. It caused America to enter the war. 4 years after that, the United States gradually stripped Japan of its empire. The most famous moment in that campaign was the raising of the American flag on Iwo Jima. Gradually, the Japanese empire was losing everything, and the final terrible question was put to the American president, Harry Truman, what to do about the Japanese homeland. If America tried to invade Japan with its troops, the president was told, as many as 2 million Americans would die. That was unacceptable, but there was another way. Scientists had invented a new, powerful weapon called the atomic bomb. President Truman decided to use it. So on August 6, 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Hiroshima, destroying almost the entire city. When Japan did not respond, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki on August 9th. Japan surrendered. This ending to a war is called an unconditional surrender. What that means is that one side is completely defeated. They completely lose the will to fight. They allow the winners to have total control. Representatives from the Empire of Japan boarded the USS Missouri, the immense American battleship, and signed the surrender. By the way, you can visit the USS Missouri and stand on that very spot. The Missouri is now a floating museum in Pearl Harbor. I had the chance to do it when I was 16, and I highly recommend it. So we started the series talking about how Japan is a post-imperial culture today. And now we know what the main reason is. Imperialism led to the total defeat and surrender of Japan. Imperialism failed. So Japan had to abandon it and become post-imperial. But there's actually one other crucial ingredient in the making of Japanese culture into a modern, peaceful one. We'll look at that in our final lesson on the American occupation of Japan. See you next time for the conclusion to the series.